Andy Dean, there's no time to waste. This is a huge day in American history for national security. We're covering the Iranian plot for an attack on U.S. soil. If you're just joining us, we're going to go over the facts right now very quickly, and then we're going to talk to Dr. Waleed Phares, who is Fox News' #1 terror analyst. When all this news just broke, Dr. Phares was on television telling the global audience what was going on, and he's also the author of truly seminal pieces about fighting Islamic radical terror, including his books The Coming Revolution and Future Jihad. So first to the facts of what happened today. I'll do this very quickly, and then to Dr. Phares. U.S. authorities have charged 2 men in an Iranian-directed plot to assassinate the Saudi Arabian ambassador on U.S. soil. Also, potential bombings of the Israeli embassy and the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C. We also know that the assassination of the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States may have taken place in a public restaurant where up to 100 Americans may have been killed. And this was part of the plot, and the idea of killing Americans was of no concern. We also know that elements of the Iranian government were ready to spend $1.5 million to hire members of the drug cartel, the Zetas in Mexico, to carry out the assassination attempt. We also have in custody Manzar Ababziar, an individual holding Iranian and U.S. passports who was caught at John F. Kennedy Airport, who has admitted to the plot. An individual still at large, Gholam Shakiri, a member of the Special Operations Unit of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. We also know that back in August, the plotters wired a $100,000 down payment into an account that they thought belonged to a Mexican drug cartel that would have carried out these assassinations and bombings in Washington, D.C., but instead, the U.S. government and our criminal investigators foiled the plot, and the $100,000 was deposited in a U.S. account. We also know, once again, that killing U.S. citizens was of no concern to this group. We have that on tape. And bombings of the Israeli embassies in Washington and Argentina may have been next. And this was all directed, financed, and recruited and brought about by a special operations unit of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Iran as a nation and all their politicians are denying involvement as we speak. Now to go over this gigantic news, Dr. Waleed Phares, once again, Fox News terror analyst, the author of The Coming Revolution, The Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, the author of Future Jihad. He was born in Beirut, Lebanon. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Andy, for having me. This is an important day indeed because of what we have discovered and what we have not discovered, and that's probably going to be my most important point to address.
Absolutely, Dr. Phares, and I just want you to kick it off because the Iranian government is denying involvement, yet we have somebody in custody that says that he was recruited, trained, and financed by the Iranian government. We have somebody at large in Iran who had cell phone communication with this individual carrying out the plot. What are your thoughts about all of this? And also, Doctor, I need your thoughts about Iran stepping this up a level, an attack on U.S. soil. What does that mean?
You know, Andy, there's a long list of very important strategic points that links to what happened today. Let me begin with the smallest, but the most direct. If the Iranian intelligence service and those past Iran, meaning Iranian Revolutionary Guards, those in charge of international terrorism, if they have tasked an individual or more than an individual, let's call it probably a cell, to contract with the, Mexican or other, groups, Mexican cartels or parts of them. But the most important thing, to strike not in a regular place in the United States, in Washington, D.C., the federal capital. What that means for anybody who's an analyst in national security is that the Iranian networks have thought about it, have looked at Washington as a possible target for this operation, for other operations. So now the first question that comes to my mind is, how many other groups and cells and individuals and contracted allies the Iranian regime has within the United States, knowing that they have hundreds of millions of dollars, not just this one operation? That would be the first dimension. That would be what the Homeland Security, law enforcement agencies need to be looking at. Second point, Andy, is the fact that that operation by itself, assassinating the Saudi ambassador, blowing up the Israeli embassy and the Saudi embassy, this is not what we call orphan operation. This is not an isolated massive operation. This is the beginning of something. This is the trigger of a campaign that the Iranian regime and their allies in the Middle East wanted to start with. And let me give you one quick example. Remember, before 9/11 operation, Al-Qaeda did a preemptive strike that triggered the whole thing by assassinating the head of the Northern Alliance forces, Masoud Shah, 2 days before 9/11. So the second question for our intelligence community is to determine what was this operation for? What did it want to trigger? It's not just revenge. The Iranians have enough assets in our borders in the hemisphere to do revenge every day if they want to. But this was part of something big. As you said in the beginning of your introduction, this is a big day.
Dr. Phares, absolutely. And to that end, a United States response to this gigantic potential foiled attack on our soil, what is an appropriate, and I hate to use the word proportional, but I know that that may be the thinking coming out of the White House. Is a proportional response asking Israel to potentially bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities? Do we have cover now to do that? Or do we just have to let this dissipate and believe that the Iranian politicians did not do this and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard may have gone rogue? What is the correct response here?
Let me begin with the last statement, the most important one you made here, who's responsible. And let me explain to our public that after 30 years of monitoring, analyzing, following up on the Iranian regime mechanisms under the Cold War, after the Cold War, before and after 9/11, my conclusion and the one of most experts in government and the private sector is there is no such thing as wings in the Iranian regime, especially when it comes to intelligence, security, and terrorism. There is no such thing as the Pasdaran Iranian Revolutionary Guard acting as rogue. It does not simply exist, or the Quds Force. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards are the nerve center of the regime. It's not just that they are involved in intelligence services. They own banks. This is the regime within the regime, and at the top of that regime is the office of the head of the Islamic Republic, not just Ahmadinejad, who's the lower head, but the higher head, and that would be Ayatollah Khamenei. So to have the answer in a very short way.
Well, Doctor, because you've just touched on something so gigantic, and that analysis is at a deeper level than I have heard. You are saying that no matter who goes on the news and reports that this may have been a rogue group, what you are saying is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, Khomeini, the politicians, whatever it is, they're all in sync. So Iran knew about this attack. I just want to clarify that. Is that the statement?
If anything is known about, yes, sir, if anything is known about the Iranian intelligence, the Pasdaran, and their whole hub worldwide that includes Hezbollah, is unlike Al-Qaeda, which is decentralized. You have Al-Qaeda here, Al-Qaeda there, homegrown, and what have you. In Iran, it's all centralized. Nobody opened fire. Should it be on the border with Israel by Hezbollah or inside Iraq or cells in this hemisphere without the specific instruction coming from Tehran, especially an operation like this? This is a 9/11 Pearl Harbor type of an operation that could have triggered an actual real war with task forces moving from one ocean to the other. This is not a rogue group that would do it. This is basically at the instruction. Now, it could appear to some experts, let me anticipate, that it has been done in a very strange fashion. Since the Iranians have all this apparatus and cells in Hezbollah, why do they go through the Mexican? Well, guess why? Because the first strike has to be a surprise. If they move their assets and we are monitoring them, of course we're going to detect them. So they thought they would do the first strike through subcontractors. That would be the cartels or gangs or what have you. And then when we react to them, they will use all of their assets. This is a war of intelligence services, but certainly Tehran, the leadership in Tehran knows about the attempt against Washington.
Wow, Doctor, this is truly fascinating. And to that end, the U.S. response, because as you mentioned, the world will be watching. Iran is testing for weaknesses right now to see how we will react to this. What do you think the United States will do, and what do you think, in your opinion, is the appropriate response to send a message to Iran that an attack on U.S. soil of this size, of this caliber, must not be tolerated?
You're right. Let's look at the actual map of what Iran is trying to do before we analyze what should be a response to that act. If that act is isolated act, then you have a panoply of what you can do. But if that act is part of a campaign, therefore that act is an act of war, that would be the beginning in things that's going to happen in the Persian Gulf, things going to happen in Bab el-Mandeb in the Red Sea, things that could happen in Iraq as we are withdrawing, in Afghanistan as we are cutting deals with the Taliban, in Africa. I mean, we have to have a wide view of what is Iran trying to do, especially, Andy, may I add, and we discussed it a few weeks ago. The Iranian Navy sent 3 battleships or so through the Suez Canal to the Eastern Mediterranean, and deploying them there, where we have the 6th Fleet. The Iranian Navy is present where? In the Red Sea, across the coast of Sudan and Eritrea. There is a strategic alliance between the Iranian military and the Venezuelan intelligence service and military. And just a week ago, maybe less than a week ago, the Iranian leadership has said, oh, we're going to send our, units into the Atlantic Ocean, to be sailing across from, or outside our territorial waters, but across from our east coast. What does that mean? It means that the Iranians were preparing for the equipping of their forces strategically with the long-range missiles. That's how I would read this thing. So in terms of response, yeah, you're right. If the administration is willing to confront, but that's a different discussion. If it's willing to confront, you have the Saudis who are upset right now. The Israelis who are very upset right now. Many of the Arabs who fear Iran realize, oh boy, if Iran is going to strike inside Washington, D.C., of course they will not be deterred from striking inside our own countries.
I've just been handed a cable that we have breaking news that congressional members are about to submit legislation to counteract the Iranian influence and to essentially give our response to what Iran has just done to this country. Walk us through what you think is happening right now.
Well, members of the House and soon-to-be members of the Senate are going to be introducing a piece of legislation that's been working on it for a period of time, but it's very symbolic that it's going to be introduced tonight, the day that the plot by the Iranian intelligence was uncovered. And in this legislation, there is a demand, an urging demand for the administration to introduce a specific strategy to contain Iranian and Hezbollah influence and penetration of our hemisphere. I mean, we all know that the Iranians and Hezbollah have been spending money and time and putting people in Argentina, in Brazil, in Paraguay, but specifically in Venezuela under Hugo Chavez. And in that legislation, there was language already before the uncovering of the plot today about Hezbollah and the Iranian elements working with the cartels, not all of the cartels, part of the cartels across our borders. So see what a coincidence. So I think that this legislation is going to be very importantly discussed over the next few days when it's going to be, introduced to the floor.
Right, and Dr. Waleed Phares, Fox News terror analyst, there are 2 other quick stories I want to get to, moving on from Iran, because the truth is, I think somebody of your expertise, the facts are still coming out on this case, and we have to see what President Obama's response is going to be, because this has to be taken very seriously, and it'd be very difficult for us to predict the appropriate response until we find out what is what, because this is truly a disaster, an attack on U.S. soil that was just thwarted. Now I want to ask you about 2 stories. Pakistani doctor Shafil Afridi, who was helping the CIA locate Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, which, of course, we're grateful to our Navy SEALs taking him out on May 2nd of this year. This Pakistani doctor that helped the United States is now up for treason charges in Pakistan. He may be sentenced to death. Do you think the United States is going to be able to save this individual? What's your prediction here?
Well, if we were fighting a cell of Al-Qaeda in Great Britain and then a British doctor would tip the CIA, do you think the British government is going to jail that person? No, because Britain is our ally. If anything, any action by the Pakistani government against that specific citizen who helped the United States finding where bin Laden is, bin Laden, the head of Al-Qaeda and, ally of the Taliban who are and have been killing Pakistani leaders, including Benazir Bhutto. If the Pakistani government takes action against them, this is the evidence that Pakistan is not our ally. And this is evidence to why are we sending billions of dollars to the Pakistanis. So this is not a light thing. This is an important thing that is going to tell a lot about the relationship and the so-called strategic alliance between Pakistan and Washington.
Absolutely, Doctor. And we're going to be covering that story. We will not forget about Shakil Afridi and the help that he gave this country locating Osama bin Laden. So we will not leave him behind. We will follow the story. And the last thing I need your opinion on, the United States State Department has apologized. They've apologized to the family of Samir Khan. Samir Khan was the editor of al-Qaeda's magazine, Inspire. He was also a known terrorist who was with Anwar al-Awlaki, who we know was responsible in the Fort Hood massacre and for the potential blowing up of a U.S. airliner over Detroit, the underwear bomber on Christmas 2009. Why is the United States State Department apologizing to the family of Samir Khan?
You're going to just ask the one question to the State Department: who are your cultural advisors? Who are your academic advisors? Who are your specialists who are telling you that you need to make a statement or apologize or even engage with the Islamist fundamentalist jihadists? Because this apology is not about just a human relationship between a government and a family. That's not the case. If these were your families, well, you just have sincere condolences. But this is the United States government at war with Al-Qaeda. And I think what is happening right now and has been happening for many years is a wrong advice given by cultural advisors. And in many cases, those cultural advisors have been inspired by a scholarship, by Middle East studies that have been funded by the petrodollars.
Dr. Phares, once again, we appreciate your analysis. We'll have you on again soon, sir. We appreciate it. Coming